One Up Media.
Becoming a pilot requires years of rigorous training. First, you get a private pilot license, which takes at least 40 hours of flying and lots of studying. Then you can aim for a commercial license, which would need at least 1,500 flight hours. But this involves passing several challenging exams and consistently demonstrating that you're a capable and safe pilot. In order to become a captain, there's no fixed time, but it depends on the amount of experience and your ability to lead and make good decisions. Going from a hopeful pilot to a seasoned captain is a journey that demands time, dedication, and a strong love for flying. Among the countless lessons learned, pilots have to master the complex symphony of instruments within the cockpit, each component a note in the ballet of flight. In the confined space of the cockpit, pilots find themselves surrounded by a whopping number of instruments, displays, and controls. Guided by their extensive training, they have to skillfully maneuver through a multitude of gauges and screens, applying their knowledge to operate the metal bird effortlessly. Each switch, dial, and indicator holds significance, and all of them have a role to play in maintaining the delicate equilibrium of altitude, airspeed, and direction. But some of them hold more significance than others, especially when the unexpected shadows the routine. Pilots are keenly aware that during an emergency, certain gauges and displays become the lifelines in the chaotic dance for survival. For example, the altimeter, which displays the plane's height above the ground. The airspeed indicator, which tells pilots how fast they're going. Then there's the compass, which helps the pilots know which direction they're headed. We might be oversimplifying the complexities of aviation, but the message remains clear. The cockpit turns into a hub of vigilance, especially in the event of an emergency. Amidst the multitude of instruments and indicators, one of them stands out as the most feared by many pilots: the ominous glow of the master warning light turning red. The master warning light is an integral component of the cockpit's central warning system, which is designed to notify pilots of any anomalies within the aircraft. In the event of a malfunction or irregularity during flight, this master warning light switches on, informing the pilots that there's something wrong with the airplane. But there are several warning lights on the cockpit, and the severity of these warnings are decided based on how critical it is. For example, in situations such as a minor system glitch, the warning light might appear in a less prominent location and use a yellow warning light to signify a lower level of urgency. However, in the case of a critical component failure, the warning will be displayed prominently on the main instrument panel, marked by a bold, deep red hue, urgently prompting the pilots to take immediate action. On October 29, 2018, Thai Lion Air's Flight 610 tragically plummeted into the Java Sea just 13 minutes after departure, claiming the lives of all 189 individuals on board. In the harrowing moments preceding the crash, the captain and first officer found themselves locked in a desperate struggle for survival, their gaze fixated on the master warning light, aglow in a haunting shade of red, as they fought fervently against an impending disaster. From One Up Media, this is Mass Murders. As the clock neared 6 a.m. on the fateful morning of October 29, 2018, the runways of the Soekarno-Hatta International Airport in Jakarta came alive with the bustling presence of incoming aircraft, marking the beginning of another day in the realm of air travel. Captain Bhavye Suneja and First Officer Harvino were in the cockpit of Flight 610, conducting their routine pre-flight checks on the Boeing 737 MAX, while the passengers were boarding the aircraft. At the helm of today's flight was Captain Suneja, a 31-year-old Indian national boasting over 6,000 hours of flight expertise. With a commendable 7 years of service with the airline, he brought a wealth of experience to the cockpit. Accompanying him was the seasoned First Officer Harvino, a local Indonesian with over 5,000 hours of flight experience, of which more than 4,000 of them were on the Boeing 737. Flight 610 was a scheduled domestic passenger flight from Soekarno-Hatta International Airport to the Pati Amir Airport in Pangkal Pinang, Indonesia. The journey would take approximately 1 hour and 20 minutes and cover a distance of just under 800 kilometers. As the last passenger entered the plane, the flight attendants were given the directive to close the doors. One of the attendants then took out the passenger manifest and signed against it, indicating a confirmation that there were 181 passengers on board today, including 1 child and 2 infants. Taking into account both the cockpit crew and the flight attendants, the total number of individuals on the plane was 189, a number that would be echoed by the news media several hours later.
Brickyard 4529, 5 for 4. 4529, altimeter 2967. 67, thanks.
As the clock marked 6:18 a.m., Flight 610 received the green light from air traffic control, granting clearance for takeoff. The anticipation among the passengers, nestled in their seats, were palpable as the engines roared to life. 2 minutes later, the Boeing 737 MAX was off the ground and climbing. Seconds after the thrilling ascent into the morning sky, a disconcerting noise reverberated through the cockpit. The pilots acknowledged the warning sound but opt to proceed with the ascent, compelled by the need to attain a specific altitude within a limited time frame.
4529, altimeter 2967.
It's now 6:22 a.m., a mere 2 minutes post-takeoff. Currently climbing at 1,700 feet, the aircraft's ascent was abruptly disrupted by an unsettling noise emanating from the cockpit. Alarmed, Captain Suneja swiftly contacts air traffic control in Jakarta, detailing the unexpected complication with the flight control system. Jakarta, this is Flight 610. We have an issue with our controls at 1,700 feet. Requesting permission to climb to 5,000 feet. Flight 610, you are cleared to climb to 5,000 feet. Maintain heading, came the response from the air traffic controller. Captain Suneja and First Officer Harvino wasted no time. The hum of the plane's engines roared as they adjusted the controls, initiating the climb to 5,000 feet. For a moment, the aircraft obediently responded, tilting upwards. But suddenly, the plane dipped, catching the pilots off guard. Warning lights began to flicker in the cockpit, each one representing a potential problem. As Flight 610 soared through the sky, the symphony of warning lights casted a sudden shadow over what was supposed to be a routine journey. Tension gripped the atmosphere inside the cockpit as Captain Suneja and First Officer Harvino, their attention fixed on the illuminated warnings, swiftly delved into an assessment of the unfolding situation. The issue at hand wasn't immediately apparent. The aircraft's nose constantly dipped downward without any reason, and it was totally unresponsive to the pilot's control inputs. Now the plane was angled towards the ground, a distressing sight for Captain Suneja. He grappled with the controls, witnessing the sea below them, intensifying the gravity of the situation. With determination in their eyes, the two pilots coordinated their efforts, and suddenly, the plane, seemingly acknowledging their persistence, responded differently this time. The engines were on full thrust, and the aircraft tilted upwards once more. A collective exhale of relief filled the cockpit, with Captain Suneja convinced that they had successfully regained control of the aircraft. The cockpit, which had moments ago been bathed in the eerie glow of warning lights, began to settle. Captain Sunija and First Officer Harvino exchanged a glance, their silent communication acknowledging the gravity of the situation averted. With steady hands, the two pilots persisted in their efforts to locate the underlying issue and devise a solution. In those critical moments, Captain Sunija and First Officer Harvino confirmed a disconcerting pattern. The aircraft was persistently tilting its nose towards the ground and exhibiting an unsettling disregard for the pilot's commands. It seemed as if the plane had a mind of its own, navigating the skies with a willful independence. As the realization dawned upon them, both pilots noted a disagreement warning on the altimeter and airspeed indicator. This alert indicated a disparity in the meter readings, suggesting inaccuracies and signaling potential interference with the measurement systems. Then, just seconds after the warning was displayed, the big red master warning light flashed. Again, the plane begins to dip its nose downwards, sending the aircraft speeding towards the Java Sea. Immediately, the pilots tried to replicate their initial response, exerting force on the yoke to lift the nose of the plane skyward. Their efforts proved futile. Whatever corrective actions they attempted had no discernible impact on the plane's trajectory. With each passing second of the aircraft hurtling towards the sea, the apprehension among everyone on board intensified. The sense of fear permeated the cabin, casting a chilling shadow over the once routine flight. Approximately 10 seconds after the unnerving dip, the aircraft miraculously responded to the pilot's commands, returning to a level position. At this point, 35 kilometers into the flight, Captain Suneja swiftly declared an emergency to air traffic control and urgently requested clearance to return to Jakarta Airport. Air traffic control promptly granted permission, instructing them to climb or descend at pilot's discretion, indicating that the pilots will have the flexibility to choose any altitude they wanted. Little did they know, the Boeing 737 MAX had other plans that fateful day. In what felt like a mere 5 seconds of seemingly stable flight, the plane once again began a nose-down descent, this time at an even steeper angle. As the aircraft descended into the rapid plunge towards the Java Sea, an eerie symphony of sounds filled the cabin. The engines, once a steady hum, now emitted a high-pitched whine, strained beyond their limits. The rush of wind outside the plane grew deafening, penetrating the hull with an unsettling roar that echoed through the fuselage. Passengers in the cabin, initially unaware of the impending catastrophe, were abruptly jolted from their seats. The once muted conversations turned into panic cries, and personal belongings were hurled through the cabin as gravity exerted its unrelenting force. Oxygen masks dangled from the ceiling, deploying with a hiss as the plane dived towards the deep blue sea. Inside the cockpit, alarms blared in desperate urgency. The flickering of warning lights painted an ominous glow across the faces of Captain Suneja and First Officer Harvino, their expressions reflecting a mix of fear and desperation. As the Boeing 737 MAX descended further, the sea outside the windows expanded rapidly, dominating the view with a dark blue expanse. Seconds away from hitting the water, Captain Suneja and First Officer Harvino grabbed the yoke till their knuckles turned bone white, exerting all their strength to desperately pitch the aircraft upward. Their efforts proved in vain. The Boeing 737 MAX smashed into the Java Sea at a breathtaking velocity, causing the aircraft to virtually disintegrate in the blink of an eye.
Breaking news. news from Indonesia. A Lion Air Boeing 737 MAX 8 carrying 189 people crashed into the sea this morning. Rescuers have located debris, but they do not expect to find any survivors.
The flight took off from Jakarta and was headed for an island off Sumatra. This is Indonesia's worst airline disaster since 2014, when an Air Asia plane crashed, killing 162 people.
We don't yet know what caused this crash, but the CEO of Lion Air says that this plane did have a technical issue on a previous flight Sunday night. It was then cleared for takeoff Monday morning, and 13 minutes into that flight, it disappeared from radar.
On the 29th of October, in response to the tragic incident, the Indonesian Transportation Ministry swiftly issued a directive mandating all domestic airlines to undertake immediate emergency inspections of their Boeing 737 MAX aircraft. Simultaneously, a thorough special audit was initiated, specifically targeting Lion Air, aimed at evaluating the integrity of its management systems and protocols. Surprisingly, the inspections were swiftly concluded, with the Indonesian Transportation Ministry announcing the airworthiness of all Indonesian Boeing 737 MAX planes just a day later. Subsequently, on October 31st, the ministry provided clearance for these aircraft to resume their standard operations. The day after the tragedy, a massive recovery effort swung into action, employing a combination of divers, drones, and advanced sonar equipment to retrieve the wreckage of the plane from the depths below. The search efforts were mostly concentrated on the pursuit of the plane's fuselage and flight recorder, commonly referred to as the black box. Widely regarded as one of the most crucial components of an aircraft, especially during emergencies, the black box plays a pivotal role in providing critical data and insights into the circumstances surrounding a disaster. An aircraft's black box is designed to preserve crucial flight data and cockpit conversations. It typically consists of two separate devices, the flight data recorder and the cockpit voice recorder. The FDR records various parameters of the aircraft's performance, including altitude, airspeed, heading, and engine operation, providing investigators with critical information into the flight's technical aspects. On the other hand, the CVR captures audio recordings of the conversations and sounds within the cockpit, which offers a first-hand account of the pilot's actions and communications during the flight. Together, these components are key for aviation authorities and investigators, as it was the only thing that could help them ascertain the sequence of events leading up to the accident. However, the search would not be so straightforward. There were many variables that complicated the task at hand, including unpredictable weather patterns, strong ocean currents, and visibility underwater. Moreover, the wreckage from the crash had scattered into countless pieces, which made the search for the black box like finding a needle in a haystack. Despite these challenges, the dedicated rescue teams persevered, driven by a determination to retrieve every crucial piece of evidence from the depths of the sea. Those who tragically lost their lives in the crash left behind grieving loved ones, anxiously awaiting answers. They deserve to know the truth surrounding the devastating event. On November 1st, 2018, the Indonesian rescue team achieved a breakthrough by locating the flight data recorder. However, the cockpit voice recorder was still nowhere to be found.
Divers from the Indonesian Navy have located the cockpit voice recorder from the Lion Air flight.
Amidst the painstaking recovery operations, tragedy struck as one member of the volunteer rescue team tragically lost their life. He was a 48-year-old volunteer who was discovered unconscious by fellow team members and promptly transported to a nearby hospital. Despite medical intervention, he was pronounced dead at the hospital, with reports suggesting complications arising from uncontrolled decompression as his cause of death. Nevertheless, the search for the human remains continued. The first victim was identified on the 31st of October. By then, authorities had already recovered over a dozen body parts, with some of them drifting as far as 5 kilometers away from the site in the prevailing sea currents. In a solemn statement, Lion Air conveyed that 24 body bags carrying the remains of the victims were transported to a police hospital in Jakarta for the painstaking process of identification. They further emphasized their commitment to continuing the search for the remaining victims, pledging to persevere until everyone was recovered. Furthermore, the airline provided assistance by arranging transportation for more than 180 grieving relatives of the passengers and crew, ensuring they were brought to the capital city to remain informed about ongoing developments and receive the support they needed during this difficult time. On November 10th, the Indonesian National Search and Rescue Agency made a statement that it would end its search for the victims. 13 days later, investigators had completed the process of identifying the victims. Out of the 189 individuals on board, 125 had been positively identified, but the fate of the remaining 64 bodies remained unresolved. Between December 19th and December 29th, Lion Air poured an additional $2.8 million in a second search attempt for the cockpit voice recorder. Despite divers detecting a signal from an underwater locator beacon emanating from beneath the aircraft wreckage and pinpointing the approximate location of the CVR, their efforts to retrieve it were ultimately unsuccessful. Then, on the 8th of January 2019, an Indonesian Navy vessel launched a further underwater search for the recorder. It was finally retrieved 6 days later. The reason why it took so many attempts was because it was found at a depth of 30 meters underwater and buried in mud that was 8 meters thick. For comparison, that's almost the length of a city bus. After the flight recorders were recovered, the world remained in anticipation for answers regarding the cause of the crash, directing their attention to the Indonesian National Transportation Safety Committee. After rigorous scrutiny and meticulous analysis of data spanning several months, Indonesia's National Transportation Safety Committee finally released its comprehensive 322-page report on the accident on October 25, 2019, almost a year following the tragic incident. The report refrains from pinpointing a singular cause for the crash, opting instead to present 89 findings that shed light on various contributing factors leading to the tragic event. Among these factors, investigators identified a misaligned angle of attack sensor, deficiencies in pilot reporting and training, and lapses within the aircraft's maneuvering characteristics augmentation system, or MCAS for short. During the period following the crash, the term MCAS dominated headlines, sparking widespread curiosity, even among pilots themselves. MCAS is a system that is designed to prevent an aircraft from pitching upward at excessively high angles, which could result in a loss of lift. When MCAS detects a hazardous nose-up angle, it automatically adjusts the aircraft's nose downwards to mitigate the risk of stalling. However, in the case of Flight 610, the system consistently forced the nose downward, even when stalling was not imminent. Compounding the issue, Boeing had intentionally omitted information about this system from the documentation provided to aircrews, leaving the pilots unaware of its existence or function. Additionally, investigators determined that a miscalibrated angle of attack sensor on the aircraft provided erroneous data to MCAS, falsely indicating that the aircraft was pitched at an excessively steep angle. And as a result of that, MCAS repeatedly pushed the nose downward, despite the aircraft not being at a dangerous angle. Throughout that doomed flight, the angle of attack sensor continued to feed incorrect data to MCAS, resulting in the repeated downward adjustment of the aircraft's nose. MCAS remained active throughout the flight, continuously placing the aircraft in an unsafe nose-down position until its tragic descent into the water.
Terrain, too low. Terrain, pull up. V1. Pull up.
What you're about to listen to are the final moments of the pilots, captured on the CVR. On March the 10th, 2019, tragedy struck once again as another Boeing 737 MAX, operated by Ethiopian Airlines, plummeted to the ground shortly after departing from the bustling capital of Addis Ababa, the capital of Ethiopia. In an instant, the lives of all 157 souls on board were tragically extinguished, leaving behind a profound void of loss and grief. This incident once again served as a stark wake-up call, amplifying widespread concerns regarding the safety of the 737 MAX aircraft. As a result, all 737 MAX aircraft worldwide were grounded indefinitely. Boeing later initiated a comprehensive redesign of the computer architecture supporting the MCAS system, and after nearly 2 years of being grounded, the 737 MAX was finally cleared for flight once again. In 2021, Boeing faced legal repercussions as it was charged with fraud in connection with both crashes involving the 737 MAX. The company later agreed to pay over $2.5 billion in penalties and compensation. Captain Suneja and First Officer Harvino, the pilots, were completely unaware of the unfolding situation. For over 10 minutes, they struggled desperately with the aircraft, exhausting all possible efforts to maintain control and keep it airborne. However, the fate of the aircraft had been sealed from the beginning. A sequence of neglect and errors had led to its fatal descent into the water, ultimately resulting in what can only be described as mass murder. Mass Murders is a One-Up Media original. A quick word on our reenactments and dramatizations. While we can't know exactly what they say, think, or feel at the moment, it is all based on research. This episode was executive produced by Guang Jin, produced and written by Ethan Sam, edited by Alex, narrated by Jason, audio experience by Ethan Sam, with additional engineering by Ashley from One-Up Media. Thank you for listening. We'll see you in the next one.